Hi, this is Isha back here at the Mad Scientist Studio, and on today's episode of Elder Stories, I interview Colleen Austin. She is a 62-year-old florist who runs a flower farm with her husband Rick. There's a little bit of audio trouble in this episode. We only have the room mics. Bear with it. There's some amazing stories here, from early childhood traumas to her son getting hit by a car and having a traumatic brain injury. I really hope you guys enjoy these stories. I will see you guys in the next video. Hi Colleen, thank you so much for coming.
Nice to be here.
Really looking forward to chatting with you today.
And you too.
So you came into my life, the first memory that I have is you making me pancakes when I was a sleepover with your kids. And then like watermelon and swimming at the pool. Really happy memories, but I don't really know anything about your life before that. I was wondering if we could dive into that today.
Okay, sure.
So when we were setting up, you mentioned that you had a difficult childhood. Are you up for sharing about that a little bit? Where would you start?
Sure. Difficult memories have to do with, I lost a sister when I was 9.
How old was your sister?
She was a baby. She never made it home from the hospital.
Oh, wow.
But my mother, in the process of having the baby, went into, lost a lot of blood. They couldn't stop it. She went into a coma. She got incompatible blood. She ended up on dialysis in a coma for months. So we thought we were having a baby sister, and then we lost a mom, and she was never the same.
Yeah, did she have brain damage after?
She didn't have, well, maybe. She was just never the same. Her judgment was not great, and my parents ended up getting divorced, and it just ended up in...
That was the catalyst that sort of made things start falling apart.
Yeah, well, I think my mom had a traumatic childhood also, and I think that when that's your history, you just either fix yourself or you create it again.
Yeah.
And so I think that she created that with us. I had an older brother and a younger brother, and then it would have been my sister. And we had people take care of us. My dad worked all the time and then went to the hospital to be with her, and then...
So you guys have a date, like sitter or a nanny or something like
grandparents came to stay with us in part of it, and my grandfather was not a good man, and so that
happened at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something you're up for sharing about? We're being vague
Sure.
to the cameras.
Sure. My grandfather was a pedophile, and there were, most of what I recall is vague feelings. Not so, I think I blocked a lot out. I really don't have many memories from around that time until the end of high school.
Wow. So you really closed that off in your mind. Have you talked to a counselor about diving into some of that?
I've talked to a lot of counselors over a lot of time, and in fact, just recently, I had an experience with a friend, and she was sharing some things, and the whole can of worm, all of it just came out again. So I'm on the other side of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've processed it a little bit, which is why you're able to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, my mom went through a similar thing where every time she visited her grandfather, she was abused, and her parents didn't believe her. So did you tell your parents at the time?
No. Well, my mom was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then when she came, nobody asked, nobody talked about things. Nobody really, I think of the things that I did when I was a kid, and it's like, where were my parents? I had I guess it would have been around junior high. I had a really good friend, and we loved to play baseball. So we would take our baseballs and our bats, and we would ride our bikes like 10 miles to this park, and we would be gone all day.
No phones.
No phones. Yeah. It was a scary road. I drove on it in the last few years. I go, oh my God, I never let my kids ride on that.
Yeah.
Or be gone all day.
Things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
Where was that? You said you drove it recently.
Gresham, Oregon.
Oh, okay, and that's where you grew up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in Fairfield. And a lot of my life was spent in California before that, but I grew up in Oregon.
So you start to have memories again in high school. where were you at? That's like when you were like 16 or so? What were you doing at that time?
Well, my life changed a lot. I think I had mentioned earlier that I didn't, well, I was a really ambitious kid. I wanted my own money. I wanted, my mom, for all of her issues, she was very controlling. And so I did anything to raise money. I would sell seeds, I would wash cars, I would wash people's cars, pull weeds, gardening.
Nice. Good for you. How young were you when you started doing all that sort of handyman stuff?
8, 9,
wow,
10.
Good for you. My kids better get to work.
Yeah, I just sold magazine subscriptions. I would do anything.
And were you just saving that money, or were you putting it towards something?
Well, one thing I was saving it for was a bike. I also berry picked. That's when kids could actually, pick produce and make money. And my goal at that time
was pre-child labor laws.
Yes, it was, and but there were some interesting times, and we worked really hard in the hot sun, picked strawberries and raspberries, and my goal was to be a row boss so I could pick the berries that went to the store as opposed to the ones that went to the cannery.
Those are the good ones, because that means you're gentle enough.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was too small. I was a kid, and then I got babysitting jobs, and but yeah, it was interesting. Back to my childhood goal, for some reason I always wanted to be a cheerleader my whole life. My family wasn't into sports, and I didn't like television, but I wanted to be that.
Was it the dancing that
I have no idea. I just
you?
wanted to, I remember one very clear memory. I remember making pom-poms out of newspapers with the little children's scissors, and I had blisters on my fingers from the scissors.
Because they're so hard to cut.
Because you can't cut newspaper with little kids' scissors. But I practiced and practiced and practiced, and then in junior high school, I tried out and I didn't make it. And
is that hard? Do you have memories of the rejection feelings?
I remember being terrified to do it, but there was this conflict. I was going to achieve at this, and you had to be afraid. The process was scary because you had to go, yay, school, in front of everybody, and then they vote, and sometimes you fail. And I wasn't daunted by it because I was going to do it. I just was going to. So I tried out for the drill team, and I didn't make that either, which surprised me. So is there no beginner cheerleading you can just sign up for without being good enough? Because now there is, right? There's little cheer
kid
school. Yes. No, there wasn't.
So you just had to be good enough on your own.
You had to. I would watch when there was sports. I would watch the cheerleaders, and I would do what they do, and I would practice them jumping, higher. I was always practicing. And then in 8th grade, I tried out again. And freshman year, I tried out again. And I was still going to do it. And I would go to the games, and I would watch the cheerleaders that I thought were the best. And I would go, and I would, practice on my own. And when I was a sophomore, I made the rally squad.
That's a lot of perseverance.
I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I wanted that.
Yeah.
So I made it, and I was happy for myself, but nobody else was happy because I beat out a popular girl, and I was not that.
So then there was drama involved in you finally achieving your goal.
Yes, there was. I remember one girl's mother came and talked to me, and she said, "How dare you try out? How dare you?"
Wow.
And it's like...
And you were a kid.
I was a kid.
The mother was saying this to you.
Yes.
Things have changed a lot.
Yes. I didn't come from a family with money. My parents were divorced. We lived not in poverty, but there were places that we lived that were hovels.
Yeah. Wow. So that was in sophomore year, you said?
Yeah.
Is when you finally got in? And then you continued to advance through high school, and
I did.
And you went on to do that in college?
I did.
What college did you go to?
Mount Hood Community College, which was in my town.
Okay,
My town.
so you didn't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you get an associate's degree or a
I
bachelor's?
did, in physical therapy.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I started to be an art major because nobody in my world went to college. So it's like, well, I guess do that because that's something you're good at. So I was going to be an art major, and then I realized I don't really want to have to do art for a grade.
Yeah, I mean, I do music for a business, and it's like, yeah, music is a different kind of art, but it's still like art for work. It changes things instead of just creative fun.
Yep.
You know?
It changed it, and I made this decision a couple years in that I was into ceramics. I thought, I'm not going to throw pots and then sit at Saturday market and hope people buy them. This is not a good, and I thought by that time I would be married because that was the goal, be a good wife and mother. That was the only goals.
And at that time, what age were you expected to kind of be married by already?
Well, I thought I would be married and not be going to college.
Oh, wow. So straight out of high school.
Yes.
19, you're going to settle down and have babies.
It was very traditional. It was like that was the only goal that was set for me. Except being a cheerleader. That was my own personal goal.
So did you end up becoming a physical therapist?
I did.
How long were you doing that for?
Well, off and on for, probably 5 years. I met, at the hospital where I worked, I met my kid's dad. And I guess I had worked there a couple years. And then we decided to get married. And I went to Detroit with him when he finished some of his education. And I worked at a hospital there. Mostly I worked in teaching hospitals. And then when we moved back...
As a physical therapist, you were working?
Mm-hmm. And then when he did his internship in Phoenix, and I had to take state boards again, and I didn't know if we were going to be there more than a year, and I thought, so I just went back to school.
Oh, and what did you end up deciding to do?
I just was continuing my education, more anatomy and physiology type classes, and nutrition and microbiology. Just continuing in that.
So it sounds like you guys were actually together for quite a while, working as professionals before becoming a mom.
Yeah.
How old were you when your oldest son was born?
25.
Okay.
Almost 26.
Yeah. I mean, that's still young for today's, but if they were expecting it at 19 for you, like, that's a big shift, right?
I had, when my high school sweetheart went away to college and chose somebody else, I was devastated because I thought
that was going to be
I thought that was it. And looking back, that would have been a horrible mistake.
Oh, yeah. Did you keep tabs of this person?
Yeah, he got his teaching certificate and married someone from high school, and they had, kids who sang in the choir and, went
Doesn't sound that bad.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't bad, but it wouldn't have been that way for us.
Yeah.
Because we probably would have made it.
So where we left off, you were going to school in Arizona.
Yeah.
What was there other stops before you made it to California?
Well, we lived in Detroit for a while, and that was fascinating.
So you went back to Detroit after
I
Arizona?
drove my car across country. I got a job back there, and that was an education. Going from the West Coast to the Midwest with... my mom made my brother go with me because I was fearless at 23.
To keep you safe, yeah.
Oh yeah, no phones, no.
Did you have to use one of those call boxes on the side of the road? Or
No, I just had people that I was going to stay with, and I called and I checked in, and it was kind of like cheerleading. I was going to go.
Yeah.
And now I go, oh my God, what was I thinking? But
what year was that? Do you remember?
That would have been like 81 or 82. Around there. Yeah, probably 82.
Okay. And then you guys came to California?
Well, first we went to Phoenix. We were there in Detroit while he finished his externship. And
what's the difference between an internship and an externship?
The externship in the osteopathic profession, they have to rotate through all the specialties. So when they are finished with the classes, then they rotate through each individual specialty. And he was, did emergency medicine at Henry Ford Hospital, which was lots of gunshot wounds.
In Detroit?
In Detroit.
That must have been an intense time. And you were working at that hospital too?
I was.
So were you helping people do physical therapy post-gun victim?
No, I was at a different hospital than he was. I did physical therapy on the wards. These were people that were hospitalized for their injuries. I had a lot of patients who worked for Henry Ford. The Ford factory was there.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opener. I learned so much in the short time we were in Detroit.
Yeah.
People there I had one patient who said, oh yeah, well we would take a poll and we would put money in the pot, and whoever won, they would sabotage the line. So we would drop the car in the paint, and then it would stop the process for a whole shift.
So people could get a day off?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Wow.
Which is...
crazy.
You don't do that. I'm an ethical person. Oh my God, this is where cars don't work. And these are why, there's no quality control. And this was a manager that I was talking to.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Would people get in trouble for doing that? That's why they drew...
If they got caught.
Yeah. But it was just, an accident.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, look what happened. Darn. I guess we all get the day off. Yeah. But Detroit was a very interesting place. I really didn't know what to expect when I went there, but I was going to go because I was going to be with David and we were going to be married. And I learned that people in the Midwest are clannish, and that I had a foreign car with out-of-state license plates. And I was a single female, so I had all the strikes against me, unbeknownst to me.
Yeah, so you were the outsider, the foreigner.
Oh, yes, and I ended up getting a job in a 90% female staffed hospital.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of those women were single, so I was a threat. But nobody would.
But you were with David at the time,
I
right?
was.
But they didn't know that?
Yeah, didn't matter.
Yeah.
But nobody talked to me. I mean, nobody spoke
So it was
to me.
really hard to make friends while you guys were there?
Yes.
Did you find any people that lasting relationships?
My friends that I made were interns that worked at David's hospital.
Oh, interesting.
But I kept busy. I took night classes. I taught dance exercise classes, dance aerobics. I did set up corporate exercise plans, and I would go to the facility and I would have a class. I did it at the hospital, my hospital, David's hospital, and that at a local bank.
Cool.
Yeah, I was really busy.
So when did you guys leave Detroit? Then you went to Arizona.
Yeah.
And then when did you leave Arizona?
In 1980. Well, Aaron was a baby, so it would be 85.
Oh, okay. So you had Aaron in Arizona and then decided to move here?
Yes.
And you guys moved straight to Sebastopol?
We moved to Sacramento first.
Oh, okay.
Took over a practice for another physician in Orangevale, actually. And Lauren was born there, in Carmichael.
Oh, okay.
And we bought our first house there. That's when I stopped doing physical therapy and I ended up running the office, and that was my life for...
Oh, so you became an office manager, receptionist, billing
nurse,
person.
medical assistant.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, catch-all office helper.
Yes.
Wow. And did you need special training for that? You said you did nursing work. Was that part of what you were trained to do?
I didn't give injections or draw blood, but I could do all the tests and assist on
vitals
things.
When people come in. Yeah. Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
How long did you work in David's practice for?
Well, all of that time in Sacramento. I don't know. Up until the end. Up until we got divorced. Up until the 2000s.
I had no idea. Wow. So when your kids were little, you guys moved. So Lauren was born in Sebastopol?
Sacramento.
Sacramento. So both your kids were born in Sacramento. When did you guys move?
Aaron was born in Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
And Lauren was born in Carmichael, which is near Sacramento.
Okay. And then when did you guys move to Sebastopol?
Would have been... I lose track of time. 90.
1990?
92.
Yeah.
In there.
Aaron was like
Kids were little.
7.
Kids were
5 and 7.
Yeah.
So when they were really little and you were working in David's practice, who was taking care of your kids?
We had a daycare provider.
Okay.
At first, we had one that came to our house, and then we ended up going to. There was a daycare woman in our neighborhood, so we, that she had 2 kids, so there would have been 6 kids altogether.
Was that challenging to be working so much when
was
your
hard.
kids were little?
It was really hard.
Yeah. But it was like your family's business, and that was the way you guys kept going.
And David, for sure, I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. It was never my plan to do that.
Yeah.
But he really felt that I needed to be there in the office. And
so that was a point of contention for you guys?
Not overtly.
Yeah. But
Really?
thinking back,
Yeah.
you would have preferred to be home with the
Oh,
kids.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of, at that time, doctors were making decent money, right?
They were.
So,
And it never was about money.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing.
Okay. So why do you think he wanted you to work so much?
Well, his mom did. That's what moms do. Moms support the dad. That's what they do.
Oh, okay. It's just family tradition.
Yeah, and I don't even understand how the whole thing even became a thing. Well, I had a medical type degree, so I knew a lot. A lot. And I'm an organized person, so it was easy for me to run a practice. And then he said, the person who came with the practice was... he didn't think she was doing things correctly. So he said, I think you need to take some classes. So I went to some coding classes, which is how you translate what's wrong with a person into numbers so it can be billed.
Okay, insurance company billing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I went to this class, it was a weekend class, and realized this person did not do, this was not, there were all the ramifications of how her lack of skill was going to follow us, David as a practice.
Yeah.
It was going to follow us and set up this database, and it's like, whoa. And he knew me well enough to know that that would not be okay for us to just go down the hole. So
Yeah.
I ended up taking over the billing, and we had he had a mentor, Gary Graham, who was a really good guy, osteopath in Rockland, which was not far from us, and his wife ran his office, and she was a bookkeeper, and some of the things she said, oh, well, this is how you need to set it up. And a lot of things started making sense.
And this is like pre-computer software for this?
Yes, it was all done manually.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts in medical practice.
Yeah, and you had all those giant paper charts. You had to do the filing and stuff.
Yes, and day sheets and ledger cards and yep.
It's a lot of paperwork.
That's a lot of paperwork.
I actually worked in my dad's office when I was 12, making copies of charts when records were requested by other practices.
Yes.
But finding the chart in the giant wall of charts, and they were sort of alphabetized, but it always got a little messed up. It was not the easiest thing.
It was not the easiest job, but I like organization and balance, so our office was really organized.
And did it stay on paper the whole time you were there? Electronic medical records came later?
Oh, yes. That's been most recently. Yes,
Yeah.
Everything stayed on paper. Except the billing could be computerized, but you still had to make a paper copy. Because if you ever had to prove something or fight for a claim, that was mostly what I ended up doing. Fighting workers' comp and fighting national...
Insurance is horrible. Yeah. And you billed this much and then they pay you a percentage? It doesn't make
and then
any
you go,
sense to me.
no, this is not this is supposed to be allowed, and then you have to fight it, and it takes 6 months to get, the last $5, and it was...
That sounds really frustrating on a day-to-day basis.
It was frustrating, except it was a challenge.
And
it was a puzzle.
Succeeding, yeah.
Yes, and even if it was $5, it's like...
We got that.
We got it.
So you mentioned that you and David eventually got divorced. Do you want to talk at all about what led to you guys separating?
I think it was just I continued to grow myself. I've gone to lots of therapy. I have a spiritual practice that I was following. Over time, we just, he was the doctor, I ran the office, and then life was just so busy, there was nothing in between anymore.
Mm-hmm. So between being a parent and running a business, there was not much of an actual relationship, like a couple's time.
No.
And that over many years, that can be really problematic.
Yeah. And as it ended up turning out, David had a spiritual path also. He was always questing. When I met him, he was reading the book from Eknath Easwaran, who's the founder, he's since passed, but the founder of the Blue Mountain Center of Meditation in Tamales, which is why we ended up here. So he would drive from Sacramento for the Tuesday night classes every week. And ultimately we moved to this area so he could be closer to that. And in fact...
I'm glad you guys ended up here.
Yeah, thank you. We ended up... it was just... Life just has a way of rolling forward, and choices you make redirect you. Well, we moved here, and there was a school at the ashram, the Adi school. And they followed a Waldorf tradition, and... we volunteered, so it was all the way out in Tamales, so that's a half an hour drive. So when it's your turn to drive, you go and you volunteer. You work in the garden, you work in the kitchen, you work in the office. Well, because I had office skills, I was funneled into the office at Ramagiri, and they didn't have skilled people there, or they did things the way they always did it. One particular thing, people would pay for the books because the Nilgiri press was at the ashram, so the books were actually created there, and the billing was done in the office, which it was not much bigger than this room. And people would send in the checks, and they would mail the books, and the checks would sit there on this shelf until the person who volunteered processed the checks. And I'm going, that's a lot of money. That's just sitting there on the shelf if they got sick and they weren't there for 3 weeks. And I go, why don't you just photocopy the checks, take the checks to the bank, and then when the person comes in, they can post the payments from the copies. In the meantime, you've got the money in the bank.
Yeah. Because anybody can drop off the checks. Anybody. It was the bill, like the bookkeeping, that was the difficult part.
Yes. Having someone stay on, having it be their job to just stay on this. And from the medical office background, you stay on it. You don't let checks sit in a drawer. You got to keep going. But it was like, oh my God, I'm the smartest person. And like, no, this is not smart. This is just, practical. So I ended up being in the office at the ashram, which is apparently something you aspire to, unbeknownst to me. Okay. Usually you start by weeding or working in the kitchen, and you never just start in the office. So it was similar to living in Detroit. Because
people were jealous of you having that?
Jealous or angry. One person that I carpooled with was really angry at the injustice of it all. Because you got to go straight to the top? I know.
Oh, a volunteer position?
Yes.
Okay. That's really kind of
I know, it's an oxymoron, really.
Yeah.
But she ended up taking out her frustration on Aaron. And one day...
How old was Aaron at the time?
He would have been, he would have been 7, maybe? 6 or 7? Maybe 6.
And this is an adult taking her frustrations out on a kid? Okay.
Yes.
Do tell.
Well, she was physical to him. I don't know if he... my older son, Aaron, is very strong-willed, and he has... he's one of the kids that always asks why. Everything is why. Why,
Sounds familiar.
And I don't know if he asked her too many why questions in the car, or if she was... I don't know what occurred. But I came home, she had carpooled that day. I came home and she had him like this. And it's like, nobody grabs my kids like that.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And she ended up, all of the anger about the injustice of my position and et cetera, came out.
Wow.
But a lot of it came out at Aaron.
Yeah. Which
was, nobody messes with my kids.
So this is supposed to be a meditational center for being calm, right?
Well, the philosophy is that, because I had, it wasn't my spiritual practice there. It was David's. And so I was being the, good supporting person. And so I was going out there and I was volunteering and the kids were going to school there. And the philosophy was, if you have a conflict with someone like this, you draw closer to them. That's what, because somehow there's a need there for you both to be learning something. Mm-hmm. So I put my own stuff aside and I tried really hard. And when it became, she was physical with my son, I thought, that's it. I'm not putting anything aside. I'm taking my kids out of this school. I'm not volunteering anymore, because it was a big time commitment to do this. And that was that.
And then they switched to Willowwood?
They switched to Willowwood, which is a Waldorf format school. And then got very involved in, volunteering at Willowwood. We were very involved at Willowwood.
Were they still sort of building that school when you guys were getting started?
Yes, that's where we met. A lot of their friends, Nathan and Jeffrey and Jean and Betsy and Ari Herman, and the long-time circle of friends all started there. Yeah,
pretty amazing when kids grasp on that, and then the parents become friends too, and it becomes your sort of clan. Yeah.
And that was our life. That was our life for a while.
Yeah.
And then, things have a way of changing.
So I also went to Waldorf school and then switched to public school, which is where I met your sons.
Yes,
what led to leaving Willowside and going to the public school?
Well, interesting. It's there's a pattern in my life, it appears. You think that you're doing the right thing, or you volunteer if you happen to be good at something or make things happen.
You start doing office work at Willowwood?
And among other things. Yeah. I just got really involved. I have skills. Yeah. So if someone needs help, I'll offer my skills. It's never anything other than, I have this thing that you need. I'm happy to help. Yeah. There were several people. There were actually quite a lot. Willowwood School was a 4-day-a-week school, and it was the premise that on Fridays you would educate your own kids. Well, that would be great, but a lot of parents had to work to pay for the tuition.
And you were working at David's office on Fridays?
No, I was actually taking it off. Okay. But there were a lot of people at Willowwood who had to work to provide tuition. There's a trade-off there. Yeah. So I was trying to get a daycare provider and a facility at the school, so that the working parents could actually have a place for their kids to be, a safe and nurturing environment, so they could continue to go to that school. Yeah. So I found volunteers, I found carpeting and flooring, and we cleaned this room and got it all set up. I found a daycare provider. It didn't cost the school anything. Well, there were teachers that weren't getting their needs met, and they were very angry that now there was daycare. And they were angry at me because I was the one that made it happen. Even
though you didn't take anything from the teachers?
No, it didn't matter. Yeah. It didn't matter.
Wow. So is that why you left then?
Aaron ended up having a conflict with his teacher in a similar way, but I think there was tension in the school. It's like any group. This is my philosophy of life now. Okay. Any group, the PTA, a school, an athletic team, a church, they're all the same. You get in a group, and then there's going to be someone who likes having power or notoriety, or power and notoriety and control. There's always going to be people. They rise like cream, but you do not ever threaten their authority or their position. If you do, things start to unravel really quickly. And so after the ashram situation and then the Willowwood situation, my kids went to public school, and I carefully participated in fundraisers and the PTA. I wasn't going to run for any board. Because I'd already done that.
Yeah.
Like, no way, I'm not doing that again.
That's too bad that you you try to really be involved, and then you have to push back because all these bad situations happen.
Well, not bad situations, learning situations.
You have a good way of looking at things.
Well, you learn about human nature by being with other humans.
Yeah.
And there are people who like being a big fish in a small pond. And all of these were like, it wasn't a place for me to have notoriety. I just like to help. And if I have skills, we help. I remember many long days with David and Jean and Betsy and the boys, and we were cleaning and setting up portables, and it was like, yay, we did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
Good memories.
Yeah. It wasn't, look what I did. It's, yay, we did it. Look how hard we worked, and we did it under budget. I mean...
That's cool.
I
want to circle back to you saying you worked at David's office until the divorce, and you said very briefly you guys got divorced because you just grew apart. Was that an easy decision then? You guys were able to sit down as adults and say, this isn't working anymore? Or was it like this tension, fight,
Well, I think what precipitated it, he was on a spiritual quest also. And he started doing light body work, which would be shaman training. And part of the shaman training that he would go travel to involved vision quests, which involved ayahuasca or peyote or whatever the hallucinogen was.
Yeah.
Well, one of the times that he was on his trip, he came back after. It was a difficult, challenging time. My mom was really sick. She was in the hospital and not doing well. She was on dialysis, and Aaron was really having a challenging time. And so he was on his vision quest, and my mom was in the hospital at the end of her life. Unbeknownst to everybody, she passed much quicker than everybody thought. And he came back from this trip, and whatever changed for him there severed our relationship. It was just like over.
Day, wow.
Yeah, it was like I didn't physically recognize him, and there was just the connection between us was just gone. And it, my mom ended up passing away, and then Aaron ran away, and it was one thing after another.
Tell me a little bit more about Aaron running away. This is for a long time, or just like an evening?
It was probably a week.
Oh my gosh, how old was he?
Freshman. 8th grade freshman.
How did I not know about that? Seems crazy. Seems crazy because we were really, really tight. We were in a band together and stuff.
Know.
So. I had no idea.
He did. He was the catalyst in the family for change. Aaron was always the why kid, so if things weren't real, he would bring things, he would bring things out. He didn't like our rules.
I mean, my parents were much more loose with things at that age, when I was that age, and I remember you guys being hard-nosed. When you see your friends having privileges that you don't get to really just like, at that age, you're like, oh, I just want to have fun and do all these dangerous things. And when your parents won't let you and your friends can, I can see that being frustrating as a teenager.
So he ran away, and we got the police involved because he didn't obviously tell us he was running away. And the sheriff that came out said, this happens all the time. We don't require or don't suggest that you fill out a missing person form, because usually you will end up hearing from them or from a friend. Well, we have rules for reasons, and I didn't think that I was overly strict, but he did.
Yeah.
Both of his parents. So then we found out where he was, and we talked, and he said, well, I'm ready to come home now, and I said no. And his dad was mortified. Oh my God, he needs to come home. And I'm going, no.
Unless you actually agree to these rules.
Yeah, it's like, no, you put us through this. You aren't satisfied with where you live. Okay. There's lots of things that you can do if you're not satisfied where you live. You can be an emancipated minor. You can do your own schooling. There's a lot of things you can do. And I was very logical about it. Okay, so if you want to live on your own, this is how much it's going to cost. So these are the things you're going to need. These are how much these things are going to cost.
And he was too young to even work, right? Because if you said he was 8th grade or freshman year, that's 14. And you can't get a job in California at that time until you were 15 and a half or something.
Yes, and if that's true, there are jobs that you can do. You can mow grass. I did jobs. You can sell seeds.
Okay, yes, you're very resourceful. So there is things you could do, but you couldn't go put in an application at like a store. And
no, so that is the logic in his method of problem solving.
Yeah.
The lack of logic. Okay, you want these things, but you're not willing to make agreements to have these things until you agree to not do this again.
Yeah.
Or work out a different way. No, you're not coming home. No. And that was a bone of contention with his dad and I.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he came home and we worked it out, and and it was this was all in the year, all around the time when my mom died, and that was.
So you had grief, a child running away, and in the middle of getting a divorce, all in the same year.
Well, we didn't know we were getting divorced. That happened the next year, but there were, it was a really hard time.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
A really hard time.
But you seem to be the person who can take that as a learning experience and just grow from it.
Well, what are your options? I mean, really, you can learn from it and have that not happen again.
Well, some people just dwell on things and never move past it.
Sometimes people do that. Yeah. That never worked for me. Dwelling on it just makes you sad.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you can look at it like that. So you guys got divorced. You stopped working in his practice. So that was the end of your second career?
Yeah.
And then what was your third career? What did you go into after that?
Well, I started transitioning out of the office. Before we got divorced, I hired a wonderful person, Carla, trained her to do everything that I do. And it took us a while to get divorced, so I still ran the practice.
That must have been hard.
It was hard. Not the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was hard. And then I finally transitioned out. In the middle of that couple years, had to sell the house, so that was all on me. David moved out, and I paid.
Could you guys not afford to keep that place?
He did not want me to have it.
Because you guys... Did he explain? What?
No, he said, I don't mind helping you out, but you can't have the house.
I don't understand.
I didn't either, but it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I wanted to have an end point.
Yeah.
So I did the yard, and I cleaned the house, and I painted the house, and got it ready, and we sold the house. So then I leased a house for a year, because I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I think you were at the Starlight Lane house. I think you were there, too.
Yeah.
We leased this house for a year, and then my wonderful realtor, Sandy Gary, said, I know you just did this, but you got to go look at this house. And I'm going, no, I just signed a year lease. Oh, I can't do this. No. She goes, just look at it. Well, so I went and I looked at this property on Irwin Lane, and it had all the potential. It was a small house that I could live in. I could fix up the back. It was going to be great. And my criteria was that I would have a place where my kids could live in Sonoma County.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to have to sacrifice my privacy for that. So I found some people to sublease the the place, and it was okay with the owners. And we moved into this house on Starlight Lane, and it was we moved in the 1st of September, and then 9/11 happened. So it was like this, just the continuing
turmoil.
Yeah, that just went on and on and on.
So, I don't think I heard, what was the third career you were doing at this time?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was consulting in doctors' offices, organizing.
Helping other offices get their businesses together.
Yes, because in my experience, there's this giant gap, and how doctors can be embezzled quite easily because
it happened to my dad. Yeah, he had an office manager that managed to get like 18 grand out of his practice before my dad found out.
Well, that's what I was doing. Not embezzling, but making
helping
sure that...
people.
Yes, because there would be the billing. There would be the mentorship that I got. She was a bookkeeper, so there were several checks and balances along the way. It wasn't one person would collect the stuff at the front and they would do the deposit. It would be, they did the day sheet. The deposit was done by somebody else, and then it was checked with, I ended up doing the bookkeeping part. So the day sheet had to balance the computer ledger, which had to balance the deposits in the bank. And that last piece, no doctor's practice that I consulted in, and probably even a small percentage, ever checked that. So what shows up on the computer is not what shows up in the bank. There is no reconciliation there at all.
Yeah.
But it is, it's really easy for that to happen in doctors' practices.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did, would go in and go, well, you've got this huge gap here. This is what happens. There needs to be a check right here. And so that's what I did for a while. And then after the divorce was final, I had a medical insurance billing business. I think I had like 4 or 5 doctors. And then...
I'm surprised that you never worked for my dad. Always needed someone to do that. Yeah.
So that's what I ended up doing. Yeah. And then Aaron's accident happened.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So
that was crazy.
Do you want to summarize it, or should I outline a little bit and then you can fill in details?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Colleen obviously knows more about this because it's her son, but my very good friend Aaron, he was the drummer in my band, he was helping someone on the side of the road and got hit by a car, ended up with traumatic brain injury in a coma, and it really changed his life and was very hard for everyone in his life. Can you share a little bit more about that story?
Yeah. I'll start with what happened before it happened. You always know, and I get emotional here.
It's so sad. Yeah.
You always have an insight before things. Whether you tune into it or not is your choice or your spiritual path or where you are in your life. But I remember him coming to the house, and I was working, so I couldn't have dinner with him. And I remember seeing his face over the gate, and I got this insight. Everything's going to change. Next time I see him, it's going to be very different. And it was a matter of days. And I got a call from his dad that he had been hit by a car in the emergency room. And that was probably of all the things I've had to go through, that was probably the hardest.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know. The first thing you experience is, don't let them die. Please don't let them die. And whatever you can do. And then the consequences of living, you don't really think about with a traumatic brain injury.
Yeah. Can I fill in the picture a little bit?
Sure.
So when Aaron was in the hospital, his brain was swelling, and so they actually had to drill into his brain to relieve that pressure, and he was unconscious. And imagine tubes and monitors. Very scary to imagine your own child. I mean, it's really a harrowing experience.
Yeah. Learned a lot about people. A lot about myself. How I just handle stuff. I just handle it. And so he was in a coma for about a week, and I read to him every day. One thing their dad was really good at, he would read to them at night. And the story that resonated with both of my kids was called The Belgariad. It's about a boy that was born into moderate circumstances and ended up being the one that's going to save the world. It was a story like that.
Yeah.
So while he was in the coma, I just read to him all day, all day. And I asked his dad, when you're in there, read. And I remember the day that he came out of the coma. The nurse was in there, and I was reading, and I was telling her about the book and why it was so impactful, and what an extraordinary story it was. And she said, something's going on here. And she pulled Aaron's eyelids open, and he was there behind his eyes again. And up until that time, you could look at his eyeballs and you could see that he was not there. And then all of a sudden he was there. And I was overjoyed. I was absolutely overjoyed.
Because at that time you didn't know if he was ever going to wake up again?
No. Or know us.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where he didn't know who I was.
After he woke up?
That was awful.
Oh, wow. That must have been so hard.
But his feisty part, his extraordinary strong will, he had all the tubes in, and he hated it. He hated being restrained. It was in a bed with all these tubes and all these things, and he's signing to us, no drugs, no drugs, no drugs. And Lauren was in there translating, and he ended up drawing his brother a picture of what these tubes did, where they were, and I still have the picture, and it was just, this was the extraordinary love between the two. But explaining to him why he had to stop pulling them out, why he had to keep them in, and that there would come a time when they would take them out, but, this is what they're for.
Yeah.
And that calmed him down.
Because he needed to know why.
He needed to know why.
Yeah.
And I guess the time after that would probably be the most difficult, even more than the hospital, where people would come to the waiting room in the ICU, and they would need comforting.
I remember coming and crying.
And so it ended up being, you spend your time with Aaron, and then when someone comes, you have to leave, which is your heart. But then you have these other people who are really going through a hard time, and then there's comfort that has to be provided there, but then you're not with Aaron, and what if he died when you were gone? Or what if he woke up when you were gone?
So you're just on high alert at all times. Yeah.
So then he got moved to the Neuro Rehab, which was on Fulton.
I visited him there.
And that was harder because he had no balance. It was like he had a stroke in a lot of ways. And so they would, if someone wasn't physically in the room, they would zip him in this bed. And
so he was restrained. I'm sure he really didn't like that.
No, it was like he was zipped in a cage. And he would call me until he would call and call and call and call, and he would be confused. He thought that he was in a war zone. He was sure that there were snipers. He was afraid. He was terrified. It was like his brain was trying to heal, and he was in this war zone. So being in the cage made it worse. And so I just found people who would come and sit with him. We had a babysitter. She would come and sit with him. I would pay people to come and sit with him so I could go home and work. And
I wish I had known. I mean, I visited a few times, but if I had known, I think maybe I visited when he was doing a little bit better. Because he knew who I was by the time but I would have tried to be around.
There were times when, I mean, that was the hardest part, when his brain was healing. That was really hard. You know, because Aaron was 18, we had no authority. We had no input on his life. The decisions that were, I mean, he was an adult.
The medical decision?
No, he was an adult. It didn't matter if I was his mom.
Well, we just reached an hour. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you would like to say to wrap up Aaron's accident story before we wrap up our interview for today. And we can talk about other stuff another time.
I think we should talk about other stuff, because that is like a small window.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about brain injuries. I've learned a lot about people having to go through their child having a major injury. Aaron and I have continued to go see a neuropsychologist to help him. His neurological impairment is substantial in a way that it affects how he interacts with people.
Yeah, it's changed his sort of the way he socializes.
He is a different person. And so, in a way, the son that I knew died. So Aaron and I together work really hard on creating a relationship that works.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are able to do that.
And we just went to a meditation retreat together.
Oh, cool.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That is an amazing story. And I'd love to hear about a little bit more another time.
I would love that. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.